At 11:43 p.m. on a cold Thursday in October, a 911 operator in Cedar Hollow, Missouri answered a call that lasted only 12 seconds. There was no explanation, no address, only the sound of ragged breathing, tires crunching over gravel, and then a woman's voice, sharp with terror, saying 3 words, "He found me." Then the line went dead. By morning, 28-year-old Emily Harper was gone. Her silver Honda Civic sat abandoned on Blackwater Road, a lonely stretch of pavement that curved past empty farmland and dense woods before disappearing near the river. Her purse was still inside the car. Her wallet was untouched. Her keys were on the passenger seat. But Emily herself had vanished. To people who knew her, none of it made sense. Emily Harper lived a quiet, structured life. She worked as a leasing consultant at a local apartment complex, the kind of job that suited her calm personality and dependable nature. She was organized, thoughtful, and deeply rooted in routine. She called her mother every Sunday. She kept handwritten notes in a paper planner. She had dinner with her sister often enough that people joked they still lived like kids growing up in the same house. She lived alone in a small duplex with her golden retriever, Ollie. Her life was not reckless. It was not chaotic. Emily liked predictability. She liked safety, which is exactly why her disappearance terrified Cedar Hollow so quickly. Because if someone like Emily Harper could vanish in the middle of an ordinary Thursday night, then no part of that town felt ordinary anymore. Earlier that evening, everything had looked normal. She left work just after 6:15 p.m. Security footage showed her crossing the parking lot with a tote bag over her shoulder and a coffee tumbler in hand. At 7:02 p.m., she stopped at a grocery store and bought pasta, spinach, bottled water, and frozen garlic bread. At 7:41 p.m., she texted her sister, "Rachel, movie night canceled. Rain check." Rachel replied almost immediately, "Only if you're buying coffee next time." That was the last normal exchange anyone would have with her. At 9:18 p.m., Emily received a phone call that lasted just over 4 minutes. 13 minutes later, she left her house again. A neighbor's doorbell camera captured her stepping outside in. Jeans, ankle boots, and a black sweater. She looked tense. She locked the door behind her, got into her car, and drove east. She never came home. When sheriff's deputies found Emily's car shortly after midnight, the scene was unnervingly still. There were no shattered windows, no obvious signs of a crash, no blood on the seats. But outside the vehicle, the ground told a different story. There were tire impressions from a second vehicle, partial shoe print in the mud, and a long, faint drag mark leading toward the trees. This was no random roadside stop. Something had happened on Blackwater Road, and it had happened fast. By sunrise, search teams were out combing ditches, wooded trails, and riverbanks. Volunteers passed around missing person flyers. Local news stations aired Emily's photo in constant rotation. In a town like Cedar Hollow, disappearances did not happen often, and when they did, rumors moved almost as fast as police cruisers. The first question investigators asked was simple: why had Emily gone there? Her family had no answer. Neither did her friends. But as detectives began pulling records and retracing her last 48 hours, a second version of Emily's life began to emerge. One that almost no one around her fully understood. Phone records revealed she had been in repeated contact with an unlisted number for months. Not occasional calls. Hundreds. Some lasted only seconds. Others stretched late into the night. The number that had called her at 9:18 p.m. on the night she vanished matched that same pattern. And then detectives learned something even more surprising. Emily had been involved in a secret relationship. Not casually. Not casually enough to explain away the intensity of those calls. She had been seeing a man named Daniel Mercer, a 36-year-old regional sales representative who had moved to Cedar Hollow the previous year. He was polished, confident, and outwardly successful. He also had a girlfriend in St. Louis who had no idea Emily existed. The secrecy alone made investigators suspicious. But secrecy was not yet proof of violence. Then another lead surfaced. An anonymous tip sent to the sheriff's department claimed Emily had recently been afraid of someone at work. The tip pointed to Travis Boone, a maintenance supervisor at her apartment complex. Several co-workers admitted Travis had made them uncomfortable before. He asked too many personal questions. He lingered near Emily's office. He always seemed to know when she was alone. Suddenly, investigators had two men in Emily's orbit. One hidden, one obvious, one polished, one unsettling, and both had reasons to attract attention. The investigation widened quickly. Detectives brought Daniel Mercer in first. At the beginning, he was calm, composed, and almost annoyingly cooperative. He admitted he knew Emily. He admitted they had spent time together, but he insisted he had not seen her in over a week. That statement did not last long. Cell tower data placed Daniel's phone near Blackwater Road the same night Emily vanished. When confronted, he adjusted his story. Yes, he admitted he had been driving in that area. He said he sometimes took back roads to clear his head. But no, he had not met Emily there. No, he had not called her to arrange anything. No, he had nothing to do with her disappearance. The explanation felt rehearsed. Meanwhile, detectives turned their attention to Travis Boone. What they found in his apartment was disturbing enough to shift the case dramatically. Printed photographs of Emily, notes about her work schedule, a marked map with several locations circled, including the grocery store she visited the night she vanished. The picture it painted was obsessive and deeply uncomfortable. For a moment, Travis looked like the answer, but then the evidence began to split. GPS data from Travis's truck showed it never left his apartment complex that night. Surveillance footage placed him there just before midnight carrying a pizza and beer upstairs. There was no forensic trace connecting him to Blackwater Road. He seemed like a man with an unhealthy fixation, but not necessarily a killer. That discovery forced investigators back toward Daniel. Then came Emily's journal. Her sister Rachel found it hidden in a drawer beneath folded clothes. At first it looked ordinary. Grocery lists, work frustrations, appointment reminders. But farther in, the entries darkened. Emily referred repeatedly to someone she called only D. She described him as charming, controlling, and increasingly unpredictable. One entry read, "He said if I tell anyone, he'll make me regret it." Another said, "I'm starting to think I never knew him at all." And then detectives found the line that changed everything. "I think he knows about the test." Investigators searched her home again and found a crumpled appointment receipt from a private lab in a neighboring county. The service listed was a paternity consultation. Now the case had a possible motive. If Emily had been pregnant or believed she might be, then her relationship with Daniel may have been reaching a point he could no longer control. Forensic testing brought the next breakthrough. Paint particles recovered from Emily's car matched an aftermarket coating used on the passenger side bumper of Daniel's blue pickup truck. Soil in his wheel wells was consistent with the terrain on Blackwater Road. Then digital analysts recovered a deleted audio recording from Emily's cloud backup. In it, Daniel's voice could be heard saying, "You are not doing this to me." Emily answered, her voice unsteady, "I'm done being scared of you." Then Daniel said something investigators would later play repeatedly in court. "If you push this, everything changes." By this point, detectives were no longer asking whether Daniel was involved. They were asking where Emily was. Search warrants expanded. Daniel's financial records revealed that hours before Emily vanished, he had purchased a tarp, industrial cleaner, and heavy-duty gloves from a hardware store. He paid cash. Surveillance footage still captured his face clearly. His explanations kept changing. The investigation no longer felt scattered. It felt like a tightening circle. But even as the evidence mounted, one devastating problem remained. Emily's body had not been found. Without that, the case hung in a space between certainty and proof. Investigators believed Daniel had lured Emily to Blackwater Road under the pretense of talking privately. They believed the argument escalated. They believed she tried to flee or call for help and was overpowered before she could escape. But belief is not enough in a courtroom, and that gave Daniel room to breathe. Meanwhile, Cedar Hollow was unraveling under the weight of uncertainty. Rumors spread across church groups, workplace lunch breaks, and social media. Some people were convinced Travis Boone had somehow staged everything. Others believed Emily had discovered something so explosive about Daniel that it pushed him into panic. Some even suggested she had run away, though few truly believed it. The longer Emily remained missing, the darker the theories became. For Emily's family, the mystery was torture. Rachel later said the hardest part was not knowing what to grieve. Was Emily alive and terrified somewhere? Was she injured? Was she already gone? Every hour without an answer created a new possibility, and none of them felt survivable. Detective Lena Ruiz, who led the case, described the atmosphere as a slow suffocation. No one in town could move forward because the story had no ending. And when a story has no ending, people begin filling the silence with fear. Then the weather changed. 12 days after Emily disappeared, heavy rains caused part of the riverbank near Blackwater Road to collapse. A county worker inspecting erosion spotted fabric tangled in exposed roots below the embankment. Deputies arrived within minutes. What they found there finally answered the question no one wanted answered, and it changed the entire emotional weight of the investigation in a single moment. Emily Harper's body had been concealed less than half a mile from where her car was found. She had been hidden in a shallow depression beneath brush and plastic sheeting. The medical examiner determined the cause of death was manual strangulation. There were defensive wounds on her arms. Dirt and bark under her fingernails suggested she had fought desperately until the end. The recovery shattered whatever hope remained, but it also gave investigators what they needed to finish the case. The next morning, Daniel Mercer was arrested outside a hotel in Jefferson City. In his truck, detectives found work gloves, a gasoline receipt from near Blackwater Road, and a velvet pouch containing a necklace Emily's mother identified immediately. At trial, prosecutors laid out the case piece by piece. Daniel had built his life around control. He maintained multiple relationships, concealed the truth, and manipulated the people closest to him with charm and selective honesty. When Emily confronted him with information that threatened his image and future, that control cracked. The possibility of exposure, financial responsibility, and public humiliation became intolerable to him. So he arranged a private meeting, and when Emily refused to back down, he silenced her. The defense tried to frame the killing as a spontaneous emotional explosion, but the hardware store purchases, the secluded meeting location, the hidden body, the lies, the forensic evidence, and the recovered recording painted a different picture. This was not just anger. It was entitlement turning violent. Daniel Mercer was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. The verdict closed the legal case. It did not close the wound. For Emily's family, justice felt thin compared to loss. Rachel said the trial gave them facts, but not peace. There was no sentence strong enough to restore the ordinary life Emily had been living just days before she disappeared. No verdict could undo the final terror of that night. Cedar Hollow changed too. Blackwater Road became a name people said quietly. The apartment complex where Emily worked introduced nighttime escort policies and upgraded surveillance. Local advocacy groups used her story to raise awareness about coercive control, emotional abuse, and the danger of dismissing threats simply because they come from someone familiar. Because in the end, Emily's case carried a truth more unsettling than the crime itself. The person who killed her was not a drifter, a masked stranger, or a shadowy intruder waiting in the dark. He was someone she knew, someone she once trusted, someone who likely looked perfectly normal to almost everyone else. And maybe that is what lingers most. Not just that Emily called 911 and said, "He found me," but that by the time she said it, she already knew exactly who she was talking about. And the question her story leaves behind is one that reaches far beyond Cedar Hollow. How many dangerous people are still being mistaken for safe ones, simply because no one has seen what they become when control starts to slip?